Good morning and welcome to another Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Jen, and today we are talking all about the octopus. Yes, the one, the only, the wonderful octopus. So, friends, during this program today, if you are interested in asking questions about the octopus, we'd love to be able to answer them, as today it is Ask a Scientist Octopus Edition. So, you can go on ahead and contact us by basically texting us any kind of questions that you may have or giving us any comments. If you happen to have a favorite octopus fact, we'd love to hear that too. You can go on ahead and text us down below. 562-286-1838 is the best way to contact us. Now, it is Friday, I believe the 17th of June. And so with that, we are airing from 9 to 9:30. And if you happen to have any additional octopus questions, you can always go on ahead and email us down below at live@lbaop.org. And then we'll get to that as soon as we can. All right, friends, but let's go on ahead and gain some inspiration by getting a chance to look at an octopus. And now my friend Cynthia is with me today, and she's going to be showcasing much of the octopus footage behind me. So I'm going to have her pick her octopus picture of choice to kind of put up behind so we can maybe make some observations about an octopus, right? Because one of the nice questions that we get is, really what makes an octopus an octopus? Right? Are there certain key features that really kind of stand out versus a squid or maybe a cuttlefish or a nautilus, which are all of their other relatives? So, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think makes an octopus an octopus? Now, here we have a two-spot octopus, named for that because of the spots that it has on it. Two spots right here, and then also on the other side too. So this is our two-spot octopus, and these animals are found off of our coast, which is kind of fun, off of Southern California. But as we go on ahead and we look at this little cutie right here, I know for me, something that I kind of naturally see are all of the suction cups, right? To me, that's one of the things that I'm like, octopus suction cups. Now, of course, squid do have suction cups too, but for our octopus, octo meaning 8, right? We have 8 arms, and on all of these arms, we're going to go on ahead and see all of those different suction cups. So we can see that they start out pretty much big as we start out more internally within the octopus. And then as we kind of go further and further out of the octopus arm, those suction cups get smaller and smaller. And we can see, this is awesome. This is our giant Pacific octopus. And we can also see that same thing, right? So you can see how those suction cups start out really big, more towards the inside part of our octopus, and then get tinier as it moves outwards. That's pretty cool. Now, this is our giant Pacific octopus here at the aquarium. And so with that, we're able to see it move around too. And how exactly does it use its suction cups to move? What do you notice? It almost looks like it's doing this weird thing where if you didn't know that there was glass, it looks like it kind of like was suctioning up a wall. But when we think about suction cups, right, they stick. So our suction cups right here are sticking onto the glass, and they're able to basically go on ahead and move around, sticking from surface to surface as they explore their habitat here. Now, these suction cups are also pretty amazing because they can also taste with these suction cups too. So it's not only just to be able to move, but also to taste their environment. Could you imagine if you had your hands and you had pretend suction cups as you were going around and you can taste every surface that you were on? Yeah, I don't think I'd like that very much too. Unless maybe I was at a bakery and then I could taste, like where there's like fresh cookies or cupcakes or maybe frosting, right? I'd be very selective of where I would go on ahead and touch. But here we can get a chance to really see those suction cups in action. Now, we did get a question that came in of why do octopus not breed in a lab? That's a very interesting question. For an octopus, they are very interesting creatures. They do live for a few years. And talking about those suction cups, actually, that's one way that you could tell a difference between a male and a female octopus. If we go on ahead and we look at an octopus straight on, eye to eye, and if we go on ahead and we look at, I believe it's like the third arm from the right-hand side, that's going to be basically where we can see suction cups. And if there happens to be a lack of suction cups towards the end of that third arm, also known as a hectocotyledus, then that's where basically we have like a packet that then gets sent over to the female to fertilize her eggs with. So the females are the one that takes that packet and sprinkles it all over her eggs, and she's the one that holds on to all the eggs over time. Now, what's really interesting is that the female octopus, once she's laid her eggs and is ready to kind of brood and take care of them, she actually stops eating and stops feeding altogether. And once that occurs, she just spends all of her time and all of her energy in just really kind of making sure that those eggs have the best condition that they can survive in. So a lot of times that means pushing water over them to make sure that there's fresh oxygenated water that goes over them. So that way all those babies can breathe inside of their egg cases. And that allows them to really be happy and healthy in that environment. From there, the female, unfortunately, ends up passing away because she just puts all of her efforts and she stops eating. So that's why they only live for generally a handful of years, usually about like 1 to maybe 5 years, depending upon the species. So for our 2-spot here, it would be 1 to 1.5 years. And our giant Pacific octopus that we saw, usually about 3 to 5 years or so. Here's a nice little picture of our giant Pacific octopus, or not ours, but of a giant Pacific octopus. And, they can kind of be bred in a lab of sorts. Not that you'd normally have a male and a female together, because believe it or not, they are quite territorial. So that's why whenever you visit, here at the aquarium or many other aquarium institutions, you will find these animals to be solitary. They do not really kind of have a partnership, and they just like to be by themselves. So, the only real time that the male and the female will come into contact is when the male passes over his gametes on over to the female, and that's pretty much it. The female does her thing on her own. So really, I think the tricky part is you'd have to find a female that has already been fertilized and ready to be able to lay her eggs in order to be able to hatch those eggs within the lab. So I think that the conditions can be a bit tricky. I don't know if scientists have really figured out, the best way to get both octopus necessarily in the mood to create more octopus babies. But it definitely is kind of a tricky thing because you can't really keep them in the same habitat, as they don't really seem to like that. So hopefully that answers that question. So thank you so very much for asking. So Katie, thank you for asking a question. You're asking, how do octopus eat their food? Now, we talked a little bit about tasting their environment using those suction cups. And believe it or not, between all of these 8 arms is where their mouth is located. So if we think about it, right, these suction cups, like we mentioned, go on ahead and they are able to stick onto things. We talked about how it helps them to move, but it also allows them to be able to grab food too, which is kind of cool, right? So once they're able to kind of taste around and realize like, ooh, there might be something tasty nearby, they'll use those suction cups and grab onto the food, use all of those arms and bring it into the very middle where their mouth is actually located. And where their mouth is located, they end up having a beak, kind of like a bird's beak. And I can actually show it to you underneath our document camera in a little bit. But here is basically the size of the beak itself. So it's actually fairly large, about this big or so. Now this one is actually it's a replica of a giant squid, but it's about the same size as our giant Pacific octopus would be. So once my camera warms up, we can go on ahead and stick it on under for a better view. But with that, what's pretty amazing is that these animals, a lot of their organs, most of their organs, are actually back behind their eyes. So if we think about an octopus and how they have like a big sac, basically, and what we can see here, thank you, Cynthia, right? This entire area, and then what you could imagine just kind of going on down, that entire area is where we have all of the organs. So if we think about us, right, our organs are going to be kind of like our lungs and our stomach and our intestines, and then maybe, our liver and all that kind of stuff, right? For our octopus here, their brain, their liver, their lungs, or their gills all of that is going to be located in that big sac-like compartment right there. And so basically what we saw were all the suction cups in the arms, and everything else is located in that larger area. Now here we can see a nice picture of some of the eyes right here, but we can also see an area that that kind of opens and closes. So this is an area where it's basically like a hole in the mantle is what we call it. Cynthia, I don't know if we have another picture that showcases the mantle a little bit more. Oh, this will work actually. So, because I want to actually talk about the siphon. So here we have our mantle, and it's actually, we're super closed in, but that's the hole that goes into the mantle, and we'll zoom out in a little bit about that. But here we have the siphon. Now, we talked about how the suction cups are used to help move, and that's true, but the siphon is something else that also helps our octopus to move. So it uses jet propulsion, where it's able to basically shoot out water, and then the octopus will go in the opposite direction, which is kind of cool. But not only does the siphon help our octopus to be able to move and swim, but it also brings in fresh water, fresh seawater, into the octopus's body, basically, and the seawater exits out through this other hole right here. So it's pretty incredible the way that these animals are able to basically survive in the ocean. All right, so I have my camera here. It's warmed up a little bit. So here we have our beak, and it's right about here. So here we can get a chance to see that it very much looks like a parrot's beak. We have one side, I actually think it's probably more like, this way. One side on top, one side on the bottom, and the beak is currently open, but you could imagine that it can open and close much like a parrot's beak. So here we have our beak right here, and it's just a few different parts. Now squid, like I said, this is a replica of a giant squid, but also the market squid, so any of the squid that you might eat as calamari, also has a beak. Much smaller though. I would say their beak is more like my fingernail size in comparison to this big beak right here. So definitely a lot smaller in size. But they also happen to have that little beak as well to help them to be able to eat and chomp through things. So pretty cool that they have this as their mouth for an octopus as well as a squid. All right, looks like we're getting some more questions on in. Miss Gabby from Kingsley Elementary, thank you for watching, is asking, what is the average life expectancy of an octopus? So that is a good question, and it really depends on the kind. So here off of the west coast of the United States, we do have 3 different varieties. Here within California particularly, we have the 2-spot octopus. That's the one with almost like the bullseye that we saw earlier. That one is about 1 to 1.5 years is their general life expectancy, or how long they live. We also have something known as a red octopus as well. That lifespan is closer to 2 years. And then our giant Pacific octopus is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So here's our red octopus, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. And this is also a great picture of a mantle too. So that big sac that we were talking about where all of the organs are, you can now see it really well right here. So all of the organs are all in here. There's that hole that we saw earlier where the water is exiting, and then the siphon is going to be a little bit further back, which is not currently in view. But that gives you an idea of, like, it's all arms, right? And then it has everything else all right here. Now, the kind of interesting thing is a lot of times the food actually has to pass basically through the brain in order to be able to get into the octopus right here. So there have some really interesting adaptations. Our 2-spot octopus is also a deeper dwelling octopus. It can live up to 600 feet deep. So they are definitely one of the deeper varieties. Our 2-spot are usually a lot more shallow here off of our coast. So they definitely can vary not only in where they're located, but also how deep they are found too. All right, something else that's kind of interesting about our octopus too is just the fact of, what they eat. Because if we think about it, with that beak that we saw earlier, a lot of them are going to eat similar foods, but it kind of depends on where they're located. So, For instance, our red octopus is going to be eating small crabs, small crustaceans, some other mollusks and fish, versus our two-spot octopus may eat things like limpets and abalone, snails, clams, hermit crabs, small fish. So it really just kind of depends on where they live. Versus our giant Pacific octopus, right? Our biggest octopus. Those ones pretty much could eat like shrimp and clam, lobster. So they can actually have more of a wide variety of diet. Now here at the aquarium, the diet is actually really important, and it's a fun way for many of our animals to be able to eat and really kind of be mentally stimulated. Something that we have yet to talk about is that octopus are actually very smart animals. So much so that anytime we keep one here at the aquarium to live and thrive, we want to make sure that not only are they physically happy and healthy, but mentally as well. So something that we do for a wide variety of our animals is something known as enrichment. And enrichment is just a way for many of our animals to really kind of, well, basically play or deal with puzzles, right? So you may like puzzles and trying to figure that out. So do our octopus. So much so that we get to play puzzle with their food. So some different kinds of puzzles that we have with their food is that maybe we'll use like a Mr. Potato Head kind of like toy, and we'll put the food inside of the Mr. Potato Head, and they have to figure out how to open it. Other types of enrichment could be, putting food into a jar and finding a way for them to open it up. I know when I was an aquarist, I was the person that took care of other octopus in another facility. We actually had Legos, and we put the food in Legos, and then they had to open up the Legos. So there's so many different ways that you can go on ahead and really play with an octopus and have fun ways to find it to eat. Now, this is actually one of my favorites. It's not so much a puzzle, but it's pretty fun to where our giant Pacific octopus is going after a crab, and this crab is in a boat. So let's go on ahead and get a chance to watch. All right. So here we have our boat, our toy boat, with a crab that is in there, has been defrosted. And so our octopus is so excited. And something else that we didn't talk about, what makes an octopus, and that's really kind of cool, but, it's actually more like an adaptation, a feature that really helps our animals to survive, is their way in which they camouflage, right? And so here we have our giant Pacific octopus that's camouflaging by changing color and texture, so we can see how it's super duper bumpy, and also it changed color as it moved from side to side. And that's showing that it's really interested in what's going on with that boat. So it's being super cautious, but it's slowly making its way on over. And it's like, what is this interesting thing? And remember, it has little taste buds on those suction cups. So now our octopus is definitely kind of tasting that there is a crab around, or tasting at least that there's some sort of delicious food nearby. And let's see what it does. Oh. Down goes the boat with the crab. All right, so it realizes that there's something very fun inside, something very fun and tasty inside of that boat. But it doesn't really want to eat the boat. It just wants to eat the crab inside. So here we can see it releasing that boat. It has capsized. No more crab. And our octopus is now taking its crab to go to eat in its home. Much like me sometimes. I feel like sometimes I just want to take my food to go and eat in my little home cave as well, right? So basically, our octopus here is going to use those really good, that beak, that really strong beak, to pierce through that crab's exoskeleton, that crab shell, right? To be able to get to the tasty morsels that are located inside. Very delicious. All right, so great questions, everyone. We love to hear from you, so thank you for asking these great questions. We do have several others, so I'll get to them now. Lori is asking, do they use a drill to open up the clams that they eat? Lori, great minds think alike, right? It's that beak that we just talked about a little bit ago, right? That bird beak, or that this little beak that we have right here, or big beak really, right? This beak that really kind of allows our octopus to be able to basically pierce through all of that hard structure to be able to get inside. Yeah, so these beaks are incredibly strong, so they can maybe even get through some clams too, which is pretty incredible. So good question, Lori. Rango is asking, have you seen an octopus out in the ocean? Do they have healthy numbers? Rango, that is a great question. Fun fact is that you can see an octopus if you ever go tide pooling. So here off of California, not sure where you're from, Rango, but we have all of these different kinds of tide pools. And tide pools are these areas where basically the coast meets the ocean. And for our coast, we do have sandy beaches, but we also have a lot of rocky areas too. And what ends up happening when the water comes up and down our coast basically 4 times a day. And when it goes up, or I guess twice a day, once up, once down, and then once up again, and then once down, all of the water gets trapped inside of these tide pools. And this is where a lot of the tide pool animals live. And so you actually go tide pooling. Certain times of the year it's better versus others, but when that water goes back, it exposes all of these animals. And what's really cool is when you have a super low tide, meaning that the water goes back really far and you'll just have small little pools of water, a lot of times you can find an octopus in them, which is pretty incredible. So I've mainly seen 2-spot octopus, but I have seen a red octopus out there too. So it's kind of cool that you can just go off onto the beach and sometimes be lucky enough to find an octopus. Now, I'm not always going to find an octopus. A lot of times I'll find sea stars that we have right here and sea anemones. But if it's lucky and it's a super duper low tide where you can go out pretty far, you can sometimes see some incredible stuff. So an octopus being one of them. To my knowledge, octopus populations are doing pretty okay, which is very nice, right? Here at the aquarium, we do tend to trade our octopus for, or I shouldn't say trade, but we get them from other facilities. So we here at the Aquarium of the Pacific are AZA certified, meaning that we are part of a group of aquarium and zoo process to make sure that we are part of this special group. And to be part of this special group, we have to make sure that all of the homes of our animals are the best that they can be, and that our animals are happy and healthy, and then also a lot of other things to make sure that we are part of this specialized group. But what's really neat about being part of this group is that because we all have the same ways in which we take care of our animals, it helps us to be able to trade with other zoos or aquariums. And so sometimes we'll go on ahead and get our octopus from other aquariums too, which is kind of and so, we're able to get our octopus in a variety of ways. Sometimes if we happen to have babies, and that's great, we can go on ahead and raise some of those babies, but that can be tricky from time to time. Lori is asking, can people do something during a visit with the octopus to provide enrichment? And that's a good question. Here at the aquarium, we used to have octopus encounters, but we currently do not offer them. But that was a way that, maybe an octopus could meet someone new and be stimulated by that. But currently, a lot of the enrichment that happens is within the exhibit. Now, I'm going to step off to the side for a second because this exhibit itself is enrichment too. Now, it may not look as exciting as that boat that we had with the crab inside, but believe it or not, just by looking at how we go on ahead and build the exhibit is in a very thoughtful way too. So if you go on ahead and you first look at the rocks, right? These animals like to live in rocky areas. And we can see some areas that are big rocks and small rocks. And we're also seeing different textures too, right? We're seeing really big rocks, and then we're seeing kind of like a more crumbly kind of textural rock right down here. And so just the change in textures as our octopus moves around is actually quite beneficial and is a type of enrichment. Now, not only that, but you'll see that we have other animals that live inside of this exhibit too, like sea stars that we have all right here. We have sea anemones that are down here. And we even have some seaweed too, right? And they're kind of dotted all around the different parts of the exhibit. And so having all those different animals is just another way to make it feel a little bit more at home and keep these things interesting. Now, it's also keeping things interesting because we can actually go on ahead and move around, not only, well, the animals move around on their own, but we can move around little bits and pieces. So like the seaweed, I'll give you a hint actually, or I'll give you a little secret. It's not real seaweed. So we can actually change out the different varieties of seaweed. We can change out the rocks and stuff that are in here too at the very bottom. And we can kind of basically change around the furniture that this animal lives in with to basically provide a different kind of environment. So there's lots of other ways that we can go and stick to us to make sure that it doesn't really feel bored. So thank you, Lori, for asking. All right, folks, we only have about 5 more minutes left. So if you do have any more questions, we'd love to be able to hear from you. Once again, you can always go on ahead and text us in at 562-951-18, or I'm sorry, 562-286-1838. And we'd love to be able to answer any additional octopus questions that you may have. Now, with these animals, right, they do tend to live off of our coast, but of course there are many other different kinds of octopus. Some of them will live all the way in the super deep sea, even deeper than where the red octopus are, versus others that'll live, you know, up at the surface in tide pools like we saw earlier. So they can really span a wide range of habitats. We're focusing a little bit more on the rocky reefs here off of Southern California or even of the Pacific Northwest. But there are some that will even live in tropical locations and have different kinds of adaptations to help it survive. Now, color and camouflage was one that we briefly talked about. I'm going to see if Cynthia can show us a different image or a video of how some of these octopus can camouflage and not only change color, but also texture. I'm going to step off the screen for a second. And here we have one of our octopus, another giant Pacific octopus that was at the top of the exhibit and now is going down. And wow, you can really see that camouflage, which is pretty incredible. Wow. You can hardly tell that it's an octopus now, right? Like, look at how it got super bumpy and how that color just changed so quickly. I think for me, camouflage is definitely one of my favorite features or favorite adaptations of an octopus. It's just so cool how it can change color like that. Wow. All right, friends. So I can just watch an octopus change color all day long. But if we go on ahead and we really kind of think about what makes an octopus, right? We have those 8 arms right there. We mentioned suction cups on all of these arms. And what's kind of fun is that even for a giant Pacific octopus, they have like 250 suction cups per arm. So that's a lot of suction cups just on one arm itself. But, you know, on those suction cups, they're able to taste. They're able to use those suction cups to like grab onto their food, maybe crawl around a little bit, or to be able to, you know, just to kind of move around and stick to different surfaces. We also had a chance to talk about another way that they move is by using that siphon, right? So here we can see a little part of it, but they're able to use that siphon to do something called jet propulsion. And they're able to basically smush out water one way, and then they will go the opposite direction, which is kind of cool, right? We talked about how all of the organs of our octopus are actually located in what we like to call the mantle, or kind of like the body of our octopus right here, right? And they're able to breathe, they're able to digest, and able to do everything using all of those organs inside the mantle. So those are just some of the key features that make an octopus an octopus. And of course, you know, they have that camouflage, which is pretty amazing too. So I'm going to have Cynthia play this video, and we can see it swim and then also change color too, which is really fun. All right, so you can see how it uses that siphon to move around. But here's the best part. Wait for it. Where did it go? Right? So this one is more of a tropical octopus, and many of these can also camouflage, and they also have some really fun and unique behaviors too, where maybe they might use other kinds of tools to be able, like coconuts for instance, to be able to kind of hide in them as they're kind of moving around maybe more barren areas of the ocean. And then there are other octopus, like the mimic octopus, also in the tropics, that actually changes its shape a little bit and swims in different ways that really kind of mimic like sea snakes and other really neat animals. So, friends, I'm so excited that you had a chance to be able to share in a little of our octopus discussion today. Thank you for all your wonderful questions. If you do happen to have any additional questions, you can always go on ahead and email us down below to live@lbaop.org. All right, thank you all for joining us, talking a little bit about the one, the only, the octopus, and we will see you next week on our next Aquarium Online Academy. Thanks, everyone. Bye.